The real story here is the social media reaction to this. I have never seen anything remotely like this. Okay, I've been highly critical of Twitter in particular for censoring material, for booting people, for using fake fact checks in order to target particular stories and particular tweets, particularly from Trump. I've been extremely critical of Facebook and their use of outside fact checkers. I did an entire episode on this just a couple of weeks ago when Facebook used outside fact checkers to take down two separate ads that were both true. One claiming that Joe Biden was going to raise your taxes, and the other claiming that the Equality Act would make it impossible for there to be separate male and female sports if taken literally. Okay, the Facebook took both of those down based on garbage fact checks from a garbage leftist fact-checking site called PolitiFact. So Facebook has been attempting to remove itself from the business of determining what material should be up or down. Instead, they outsourced it to a bunch of outside fact checkers who virtually all of whom happen to be left-wing fact checkers who have no interest in actually checking facts. Instead, what they do is they will take a statement that is perfectly true from a conservative, and they will fact check the implications, quote unquote implications, things that nobody said. And then they will declare that a perfectly true statement is false. And then Facebook will censor the material based on the outside fact checkers. Facebook has also set up a group. It's supposed to be a panel, like an appeals board on this sort of stuff, but that appeals board has not gone into place yet. So we have no idea how that appeals board will rule on particular cases. So Facebook has been deliberately attempting to take itself out of the business of being directly responsible for censorship by trying to outsource it to various fact-checking groups. Yesterday, the mask came completely off for Facebook, and Twitter never had a mask. And so Twitter basically just decided, okay, well, you know what? We don't like this story about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. It doesn't matter that we have yet to find an element of the story that is overtly not true. None of that matters. The only thing that matters is that this story cannot go out. It cannot go out. So Twitter decided that they were going to censor the story. So did Facebook. They both made it impossible to distribute the link. On Twitter, you literally could not link the New York Post story. If you tried to tweet out a link of the New York Post story, a warning would come up. If you did tweet out the New York Post story, they suspended your account. The New York Post main Twitter account was suspended. It was suspended. You couldn't tweet from the New York Post Twitter account because of this story. Kayleigh McEnany, the White House press secretary, had her Twitter account suspended for tweeting out information from the New York Post story. I mean, this is crazy town. This is a mainstream media, but New York Post is a very mainstream publication. It is. Okay, nothing in the story is less well-sourced than a bevy of other stories the mainstream media have run with that are anti-Trump. Does not matter. Both Facebook and Twitter cracked down on it and made it impossible to distribute the story. That's an unbelievable breach of whatever Twitter and Facebook were supposed to be. If, again, the idea is that these are platforms and that their job is to provide an open forum for people to disseminate information, particularly if the information is not overtly false. I mean, this is prior to any fact check. The emails are real. The allegations in that Hunter Biden story, whether you think they're serious or not, is of secondary concern. The bottom line is this. It appears that Facebook and Twitter were so concerned with the ramifications of a bad story going out about Hunter and Joe Biden based on leaked emails that they shut down the entire story. And there's only one reason for that. The only reason for that is because the leftists at Facebook and the leftists at Twitter and the leftists in the journalistic establishment have decided that it is time to shut down the dissemination of information they do not like. Okay, this is a threat to the Republic. I don't think Hunter Biden and Joe Biden are a threat to the Republic. I do think that social media becoming a tool of one side to the extent that they are now openly censoring what material can be disseminated. Informational journalism. They're shutting it down. You want to talk to me about Trump being a threat to the press? Trump isn't one iota the threat to the press that social media are when they decide that you cannot publish a story that reflects negatively on Joe Biden. That's insanity. Perfect insanity. And people should be leaving these services in droves if these are the standards that are going to be put forth by these social media companies. Now, again, I've been very hesitant to talk about big tech as sort of a monolithic leftist entity. Well, yesterday, they acted as a monolithic leftist entity without any attempt to pretend that they were enforcing anything remotely resembling a neutral rule. That's madness. We'll get to more of this in 1 second. I mean, I'm enraged by this, and you should be enraged by this too. Honestly, left, right, or center, you should be enraged by the idea that these social media companies will literally stop the dissemination of a story because they don't like the story, not because of any underlying reason, because they don't like the story, therefore you cannot disseminate the story. And they particularly don't like the story because they are afraid that if Joe Biden were to see that story disseminated on Facebook, that maybe Joe Biden and his Democratic friends might regulate Facebook. Okay, this is exactly the accusation that the left has been making about Trump and companies like Facebook, is that because Trump has had conversations with Mark Zuckerberg, that Zuckerberg was somehow biasing the algorithm at Facebook to benefit Trump. Now, this is all part of the leftist bullcrap narrative that they pushed in 2016 after Hillary Clinton, a horrible candidate, lost to maybe the most unpopular candidate of all time, Donald Trump. They pushed a narrative that it was because Facebook, taken over by Russian bots, had somehow changed the outcome of the election. And then they decided to pressure Facebook into changing its policies. So basically, these social media companies are so afraid of Democrats that they will voluntarily do what Democrats want so Democrats don't come after them. This is a blackmail routine by Democrats against social media. It's an inside-outside job because so many members of the media love Facebook censoring material. And it's Facebook an inside job and Twitter of an inside job when top Democrats at these places decide that it is time to shut down material. There's a baseline agreement between Democrats, the social media bros, and the journalists, all of whom are lying to you about their true agenda. None of them apparently care about freedom of the press, particularly the journalists. It's astonishing. It's astonishing how little journalists care about freedom of the press. I mean, they really don't care about it. They hate it, in fact. They would love to see, many of them, free speech cracked down upon by social media in the name of their actual principles, which are of the left. I'll bring you the details on this in just one second because it's horrifying. Here is what happened in detail. So Twitter put out a notice. Okay, they said that in line with our hacked materials policy, as well as our approach to blocking URLs, we are taking action to block any links of or images to the material in question on Twitter. This is what a Twitter spokesperson told National Review. Twitter's hacked materials policy states it does not permit the use of our services to directly distribute content obtained through hacking that contains private information, may put people in physical harm or danger, or contains trade secrets. Though the platform does currently allow leaked and hacked material from other sources, including WikiLeaks, to be shared. The platform said the policy applied in this case due to concerns about the lack of authoritative reporting in regards to the origins of the material. Okay, so let's just be straight. The New York Post reports that there is a laptop. Hunter Biden, who is a dope addict. Okay, Hunter Biden, who is a drug addict and a derelict, left his computer at this computer repair store, according to the New York Post. He just left it there. He never picked it up. It was filled with all sorts of stuff. The guy opened up the computer. He saw all this foreign material. Apparently, he called it into the FBI. He made a copy of it because he seems to be something of a conspiracy theorist. And then he handed it over to Rudy Giuliani. Right? That seems to be the way that this got to the New York Post. But according to Twitter, they suspect that this is actually Russian disinformation, that it was hacked material by the Russians handed over. So a couple of things. One, since when has Russian disinformation been banned? Seriously, from Twitter. Russian disinformation is not banned from Twitter. The entire Russian collusion scandal was essentially Russian. The Christopher Steele dossier was all Russian disinformation. Did Twitter take down a single story on it? Hey, how about the idea that Twitter takes down hacked material? Really, how much hacked material did they take down from like Edward Snowden or WikiLeaks? The answer is none. They didn't take down any of that stuff. Right? So this is just crap. When they talk, by the way, Twitter's policy is even broader than that. First of all, when they say there's a lack of authoritative reporting, based on what? Based on what lack of authoritative reporting? Again, the thing had not been fact-checked yet. It's not as though there was a fact check of the story and people said, okay, well, this story is falling apart. And so Twitter took it down. Instead, preemptively, Twitter took it down and banned you from disseminating the article. So let's just be straight about this. A month and a half ago, there was a story from The Atlantic claiming that Donald Trump routinely went around to military cemeteries and said bad things about dead soldiers. It turns out that every element of that story fell apart. There were people on the record denying the story. Every source in that story was unnamed. Every element of that story, so far as I'm aware, has now been debunked by people who are on site. Okay, there is yet to be a single named source in that story. Not one link from The Atlantic was removed on that basis. You know how many stories we've seen like that? How many links went out there about how the Russians were paying Taliban fighters to kill American soldiers and Trump was ignoring it? And then it turned out that that story kind of fell apart. Did any of those links come down? No, not one of those links came down. Okay, so there's no neutral standard here. This is just a bunch of crap. It's just a bunch of crap.